the sales team is not actually receiving those leads, it doesn't matter how well your marketing plan has gone. You have failed holistically as a team.
If the marketing team does not clearly understand the things we just talked about from the sales perspective, and vice versa, the salespeople don't understand the marketing stuff, you're just going to really set yourself up for failure. And one of the reasons we even went into this topic is it's, I think, something that you have books and books and books about sales and books about marketing and books even about development and building a company, but they rarely talk about those intersections. And I think that that's kind of a skill some people just develop organically over time. Like it sounds like that has been the case.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Challenge Opportunity Podcast. I'm your co-host, Chris Lawson. As usual, I'm joined with my co-host, Jordan Wolf, who is passionate about reading books solely about large ships. Jordan, how are you doing today?
Yeah, that's what all of that is in the back there. It's just books about ships. No, yeah, I'm doing great. Starting a new year here, and it's been a hell of a ride so far. So I'm really excited and in a good mood at the moment.
It has been a crazy year. I know for us, we jumped into the new year with a whole bunch of BHAGs, if anyone knows these big, hairy, audacious goals, all with the intent to do things we've never done. Be very consistent. I mean, we're all about consistency, but consistent about things that we haven't been consistent about so far. One of which is the podcast. It's been a ride so far. This episode, though, if I'm being very honest, is a strange episode because normally our episodes are about a lot of marketing topics, really, touching base on, career paths or things to do with business leaders. Today, we're going to be diving deeper into a joint topic between marketers and salespeople, which is marketing and sales alignment. We'll be talking a bit about, what marketing and sales alignment is, what does this look like from the marketing and the sales side of the fence, as well as providing a lot of tips, insights, how to implement. It's a topic that I don't think is covered enough. It's a topic that comes up very, very often when we're talking to prospects, at least at the agency level.
And a lot at this time of year when people are doing a lot of forecasting and building out their plans for the year. It's a critical thing that quite often gets missed. So,
yeah. So, that kind of jumps right into that topic. Why talk about marketing and sales alignment? It's a topic that most sales people cringe about, most marketing people cringe about, because there are two different objectives at the end of the day that each party is trying to achieve. But that's not really true. You're trying to achieve a high level objective for the organization. So you should be in alignment with that, but that just doesn't seem to be the case. We are at the beginning of 2023. Marketing mixes have been developed. You're now collecting data. If you are a lead generating, entity where, maybe your sales team has short or longer funnels, these leads are now being tossed to that team. You're trusting and crossing your fingers that they're doing the right thing, that those leads you've worked so hard with your team are actually being worked properly. And the sales team is sitting there going, are these leads actually what I want? Are they quality? Are they, is it a dumpster fire? Are they, wasting my time? Jordan, how many times have we talked to both parties and they just don't seem to get it?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to really resonate with those people who have B2B businesses, or, it's not going to really be as much of a focus for, an e-commerce business where the customer is dealing directly with the end product and, there's not really a handoff between marketing and sales. Sales just is more about delivering the product. Mm-hmm. But for a lot of businesses out there, actually a vast majority of businesses, period, are, people who are working with other businesses and have to not only upsell something or convince somebody to do something. If they're in the B2C side, there's a little bit of that as well. I mean, you have more consultative work that needs to be done, and people need a little bit of convincing to get that after becoming a lead. That's not where the story ends. So for a lot of businesses, this is a really big factor that needs to be both thought about thoroughly, and if it's forgotten, has consequences for your investments, your time, energy throughout the whole year.
Well, and for our listeners who maybe don't know what marketing and sales alignment is, um, it's even been termed smarketing. As lame as that may be, marketers have to come up with a
Commence
name
eye
for
rolls.
commence eye rolls. Where's our sound effects? But marketing and sales alignment is really simple. Your marketing team is working really hard. They're funneling over leads, opportunities, things of that nature, and they're trusting that the marketing team or that the sales team, is doing the right thing. That sales team is trusting that the marketing team understands their audience, they understand their needs, that they are passing the quality over. And a lot of the time, these two teams do not talk. They don't communicate. The marketing team should be talking to the sales team. The sales team should be talking to the marketing team. And through that, there should be a proper marriage, a beautiful thing. And at the end of the day, they're able to tweak and perfect the process. Sometimes the marketing team will also help equip the sales team with resource. Playbooks, proper marketing emails, brochures, and all the stuff that they need to be able to assist them at trade shows or as they're doing their sales calls, so on and so forth. But Jordan said, there's so many risks associated to not doing it properly.
Yeah, that I think is what really triggered why we even wanted to talk about this, because it's not a super sexy topic up front. As you said, like a lot of people on both sides of this tend to cringe even about talking about this, but it is something that the consequences are pretty deep. And we've seen it play out with clients or people that we're consulting for, where you've got one group of people, like let's say on the marketing side, things are going great, lots of leads coming in. And then you learn months later, well, the sales didn't come in the end. What happened? Sometimes that's, you've got to be good at sales, of course, to make the deal. But sometimes it's just the two sides didn't talk about what the other side needed. Mm-hmm. So you've got, 100 leads that came in and they seem qualified from the marketing side, and they probably are. But you forgot to ask for a piece of information that's critical for the sales process in the form, and communication was dropped. It missed the sales cycle. It just didn't work out as a result. And that means the ROI for the business. So if you're a business owner, you're investing in marketing or advertising dollars, or a team that's got to be on both sides of this in marketing and sales. If they're not being efficient from start to finish, it doesn't matter how good you are at the front of that funnel. If the back of the funnel doesn't deliver, you don't make it. And if you don't have enough leads for the back end of the funnel, then they can't do their job no matter how good they are at the closing rate. So the two of those things are critical for each other, but usually they're two different disciplines, two different teams of people with their own slightly different priorities.
Well, and a lot of the time too, the marketing department needs to understand how the sales team or those individuals can receive those leads. So we've seen it so many times where as an agency, we're funneling leads, high quality leads. We know that they are. We're getting, every key identifier is shooting up into the sky. We know just from what we've been doing for 20 odd years that we're doing the right job, and we're funneling the right lead quality over to the sales team. And then you get on a quarterly review and you find out they never worked them. They didn't even know they existed, right? And these are rules and lessons that you live by, and you learn over time, but it's a very important thing to get right from the moment you say go, because if the sales team is not actually receiving those leads, it doesn't matter how well your marketing plan has gone. You have failed holistically as a team. Again, you should be aligned. There should be a joint effort to achieve X objective for the organization.
Yeah. I mean, there's alignment. That's what they call it, marketing sales alignment, which is where you have that shared interest for the business. But I also said there's individual goals that each team has that are a little bit different. And it's really easy to put your blinders on and just focus in on what you need to do to get the job done, which is, if I'm a marketer, I sent you leads, done. I did my job. But you didn't if you didn't do all the other things that the other team needs. So, having a perspective from both sides of what their role is in making sure they're aligned with the other is really critical.
Well, and we talk about the marketer a lot when we're talking marketing and sales alignment, because they're the beginning part of that funnel. But the sales side of it, I think, is really the most important, because to an average business, that's where frankly. Like you've got employees, you've got people hitting the ground, you got real relationships and conversations occurring a lot of the time. A lot of the time, it's not just about brand awareness; it's now about actually creating revenue for the company. And so, what does this look like for the sales team? We talked about that being handed off via email or direct connection to a CRM or whatever. But for the sales team, a lot of the time, there's a timeliness that comes into play. There's a lot of research that goes into this, and I'd encourage anybody to go and just Google it. You'll find it in a heartbeat. But the amount of time that you have to reach out to that prospect has a massive impact on the percentage or the close rate that is going to occur with that lead. If you have your prospect sitting there for 12 hours, it's very different than 24 or 72 hours. In fact, I know for us, we have a rule of thumb that you have to reach out within the first half an hour to an hour. And I know people that are within, similar roles where they have a 5-minute rule. That's just how aggressive their industry is. So time to first response is something that is not only essential, it's something that should be measured.
Yeah, and making sure that when that process is activated on the sales side, that the marketing team did their research, they targeted it properly, they pre-qualified them, they've sent along all the data that's necessary. That's the prerequisite to even start on that. So now you've got this lead, you've got your own priorities, trying to respond in time. And software helps with this, making sure understanding what your particular goals are for that industry. Like Chris said, there's some industries where it's way more aggressive, or there's just a standard of, like insurance, for example. You got to be on top of that because everybody's going for that lead if they can. And so big dollars and banks and things going after that. So, being on top of that and not losing that investment means that you didn't waste the ad spend, the marketing time, all the investments in landing pages at work, et cetera. Now, there's huge research, like Chris said, like leaning on the stats on this. Fortunately, there's big Goliaths like Salesforce or HubSpot. They've done research all the time. They put that publicly. It's great. So hoover that up if you can. But the signs of where this goes it's clear as day for the science. It's going to be a worthwhile investment to make sure you're on point with these transitions.
I love that you have talked about Salesforce and HubSpot. If you don't know what we're talking about on those topics, you need to. If you're listening to this, episode and you're going, "What is HubSpot or Salesforce?" These are the Goliaths, the monsters in the CRM world. Now, that being said, there are hundreds of CRMs in the world. Much like there's hundreds of vehicles. Not every CRM is equal. Not every CRM, is, has the same functionality or purpose, nor does every CRM, are they equal in cost. Some are extremely expensive. Some have a cost per acquisition of nothing. You can get in for free. Sometimes there's, loopholes. Sometimes there's not. But, back to what Jordan was talking about, he mentioned CRMs in the form of Salesforce and HubSpot. I look at those as two very separate types of CRMs. You have marketing and sales alignment CRMs like a HubSpot, a Zoho, so on and so forth. And then you have Salesforce, which has typically been a sales CRM. Now, I say all that with a grain of salt because every single one of these CRMs are pushing the envelope on adding marketing and sales functionality, as well as functionality to service the client. So you're not getting into NPS, Net Promoter Score stuff, surveys, things, ticketing softwares, project management softwares, ERP software. It's expanding at a rate that I don't think we've ever seen. But it's very important that you have the necessary tools to do the job, which means you do have to do a bit of research. And go to the CRM that's, frankly, equipped with the necessary tools to get the job done. And a lot of the time, too, those individual CRMs, it doesn't just mean data in, data out. A lot of the time, there's marketing automations, sales automations, things that are triggering different things to occur to help move people through the pipeline, whether that be a marketing pipeline, the sales pipeline, a ticketing pipeline. Jordan, marketing automations are in a lot of businesses like our own essential. Saves us a lot of time.
Yeah, not only time, but it keeps you in alignment with that kind of relationship building mentality, right? So sales can have a downside where if you're not, treating it right, it can become all about the transaction. It's, transactional relationships are not great relationships, I think, as we all know from getting that begrudging email that we get in our email inbox every day, trying to sell X, Y, or Z, or that message in LinkedIn from somebody we've never heard of.
Email?
Transactionally.
You mean 500 emails that I get every
Yeah.
single morning and I try to unsubscribe and they still keep coming back every single day?
Yeah, exactly. But, automations can bridge the gap a little bit, even if you're not on point or you're focused on that other, lead that's a little closer to the close and you need to put your attention there. Having an automation that sends out a checking in email or something that's going to kind of continue to the next part of the buying or discovery process or keep them educated, those things will kind of lift you into that next phase through the platform and technology.
For a lot of those companies that have really long sales cycles, I'm thinking more like account-based marketing companies or organizations where there's only 4 or 5 players and you have to nurture that relationship for months and months and months before it becomes anything. Marketing automations are very important. So things like, boom, a lead came in, or at a certain point in time down the road, a task is automatically going to pop up for that individual. These are things that ensure, as a company, as an organization, that those relationships, those leads, those prospects are actually getting the attention that they need. And I think in the world that we're in 2023, you can see this in every form. Relationship management is probably at the top of the list. Those relationships that you have are invaluable. We all know companies that lost their shirt during COVID. If they had properly managed those relationships, it may have been a different outcome for them. So sales and marketing automations are essential to every single business. They're essential to relationship building, but also maintaining those relationships, which have a direct correlation with your bottom line at the end of the day.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're sitting in a company and you've got marketing personnel and sales personnel and they're separate individuals or teams, then, it really comes down to, we've talked about marketing, we've talked about sales. They seem to have their own kind of things that they need to keep in their minds. But if those two teams are not talking to each other, that is the first sign you're headed for trouble. So if the marketing team does not clearly understand the things we just talked about from the sales perspective and vice versa, the salespeople don't understand the marketing stuff, you're just going to really set yourself up for failure. And, I think that that's really why we started talking about this as a topic at all, is we've seen enough times where this is one of those things early in a year, you're planning, you're doing your forecasting, you've got these numbers, you're like, oh, we're going to hit this, we're going to close that. And all on paper looks good. But then 6-9 months later, you realize that half of your machine wasn't talking to the other half of the machine and everything's caught in the middle and now it's gone. It's just gone. All those goals, all that planning, all that forecasting didn't matter at all. And that's a shame to see those things happen. And certainly something internally, fortunately, we work to not have our own problems around that. But consulting is something that comes up quite frequently.
Well, it comes up frequently because it's a painful topic when you haven't done it properly. And we all know organizations that, don't have proper marketing and sales alignment, let alone really poor marketing routines and really poor sales routines. Whether it be just over the top in your face every day or they just neglect things. We know organizations like that. I think one of the most important things when I think of marketing and sales alignment, but more with the automations, is understanding the buyer's journey, understanding and reverse engineering where those audiences are at. So if you're in a service-based industry, getting that lead is one thing, closing the lead is another, but servicing that is, again, a very important thing. And HubSpot's really great with their flywheel methodology. That flywheel methodology is exactly what I'm talking about. When you have a client that you are servicing, a lot of the time, 2 things. Number one, you have to maintain that relationship so you don't have poor attrition or retention rates. but also you have to make sure that you're servicing them in such a way that you can remarket to them and generate additional revenue that is the equivalent of bringing on a new deal or bringing on a new client and a lot of time when you're measuring lifetime value of your customer, the implementation cost for a lot of these things is pretty low. It's actually not that expensive when you really think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if I was to kind of summarize a lot of the things we focused on, like to boil this down to value for a business owner, if I'm at the beginning of my year and I'm just about to do my planning, or I've just done it and I can now double check and make sure I've done it right, there's really like 4 major things that I'd recommend keeping in mind. One would be, like we've mentioned, reverse engineering where you want to go. So you have 2 different teams with 2 different objectives, but if they both know what the goal is, so you do your Salesforce forecasting your financial requirements up front and work backwards from there, you can then develop a plan. That plan then will have both teams working in collaboration to get to that end goal. The second thing is mapping out, like we mentioned, to the customer journey. So that customer journey, like Chris was saying, is really important to make sure you understand what those steps are, where your interactions with them are, and whether you need tools like CRMs, et cetera, to keep you involved on both teams as you move through that as a lead or as a potential customer. The third thing would be paying attention to that handoff point. So making sure when a lead becomes an opportunity that it has all the information, all the right communication, no notifications, timelines, response time is appropriate. That time is really, really well spent focusing in on that moment in your process. And lastly, the fourth thing is communication is essential. So if you have 2 different teams or 2 different individuals, making sure that they have ways to touch base with each other and correct for things that might be going awry, so that you don't get caught flat-footed 6 months, 9 months later, realizing that, oh, I just didn't know that. So-and-so didn't tell me they didn't get the lead, or they didn't need to have the information they needed.
Wow. You did all those points off the top of your head?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to clip a lot better, I think, when we put that in social media.
The truth is, though, is like CRMs it's a pretty boring topic. Like software sometimes is super fun, but CRMs is not a very fun topic. But if it's not done properly, it can cost you a lot of revenue. It can cost you a lot of market share. And so, I kind of felt that it was a necessary topic as we are in the first quarter of the new year. If you haven't implemented a CRM, if you have not taken a deep dive into what's out there, I would encourage you to. Running your Microsoft Excel spreadsheets and things like that is not going to help your business in the long run. Do it right away. That would be my advice.
Not a skill in 2023. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so welcome back to our guest portion of the show. So we'll be inviting Matthew Unger, who is the CEO of iComply, which is a software as a service platform. Basically does robust digital solutions for KYC, AML, digital identity, and privacy compliance. So I'd like to introduce Matthew, who I met back in the day and had the chance to work through iComply and other projects. And, he's going to be a wealth of experience from the perspective of a CEO when it comes to marketing and sales alignment, because understanding those 2 worlds and how they work together is pretty critical for the growth of a business, especially early on in its development. Yeah, so Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot for having me, Jordan. It's great to be here.
Excellent. So I gave Chris a little bit of a primer before the show, but I know that you've had your ups and downs with marketing and ups and downs with sales, and then those 2 worlds kind of blending into each other. So when I say things like marketing and sales alignment, that's a term that in the agency world we're pretty familiar with. But from your perspective as a business leader, what does that trigger for you? Either pain or happiness.
If alignment exists, it would be happiness. Getting to the point of having that alignment can be a challenge, and is definitely something that we have spent a lot of time working with different members of our team to get there.
Is that something Excellent. That you guys have done collaboratively, or has it been kind of top down?
Oh, that's a great question, and something we've really we've actually, I think, morphed as an organization. When we started out, it was a kind of a top-down thing, and it was kind of, you go to the sales team and hey, this is what you need to do. Here's your plan, go get it done, and work with the marketing team, and kind of just kind of delegate out the work, if you will. But we've evolved, especially as we've matured as an organization, to focus a lot more on empowering the leaders in the different areas to, one, come up with the plan. They may, we may set some directives or objectives, goals that they have to hit, but they have to come up with the plan with their team. They have to own it. It's something that they understand and can get excited about because they built it themselves. But then, of course, whether it's upstream or downstream, sales and marketing is a key point of connection between two parts of the business, and so they have to also work really well together. And so I think that's been a much more collaborative approach as far as the alignment goes between the two teams. But in addition, kind of having people run with the planning and taking that leadership in the different areas has also been really beneficial.
Yeah, I know planning short term and long term when it comes to both marketing and sales is always a challenge, and getting motivation and buy-in from the team is, especially on the sales side, is pretty critical. Um, when you're setting things in the distance, like I like to refer to those as lighthouses, and then when you've got kind of more short term, I tend to refer to them as lampposts. But when you're setting those things up, is it more aligned with the overall strategy of the company, or is that something that the annual kind of goal is more the long stretch?
Um, no, I would say there's, just trying to think through the analogy here, but there's definitely, higher level vision and things as you evolve as an organization. We're 5 years old. When we started out, we had a vision of what we were going to do in the world, what problems we were going to solve, how were we going to make money, and that's changed over time. Our flagship product today, we actually built because we couldn't find anybody that had a working product that
Mm.
actually met the compliance requirements, and that's now our flagship product. And so a lot of these things, that maybe wouldn't that morph didn't happen over the course of 1 year. But the ability to kind of give people, okay, these are the objectives, but also here's the higher level vision that we're trying to, that we're trying to achieve, and here's some of the key milestones and goals as an organization. Those can sometimes shift, and or the strategy of how you're going to get to them can sometimes shift as well. And so I think it's a little bit of on an annual basis, we try to look at the bigger picture and make sure that the goals are looking at the past year, looking at changes. COVID obviously changed the whole landscape of so many businesses, including the customers that needed to buy our software. And so, that those were all sorts of things that had to shift. It created new market opportunities for us, and that kind of meant that the next year's plans needed to accommodate the changes in the landscape as well.
Yes, we've dealt earlier with some of the challenges that people run into when they're trying to communicate some of those goals and objectives between these different departments, because they are different, right? Your marketing objectives are different KPIs than your sales objectives. How do you encourage communication between those two worlds internally? Is that something that's a challenge? Are you leveraging software?
Yes, definitely leveraging software. um, yeah, everything from CRMs to you know um, website and lead gen tools, and resource management tools to show assets on the website, or deliver assets to potential customers. Whether it's a lead magnet or some sort of resource. Um, we use kind of all of the above. I myself have worked with Salesforce for many years, and have quite a bit of experience with that. But something, even as a team, as we look at more and more digital marketing, especially, seems to be a shift in the buying persona of even enterprise software procurement,
Totally.
where there's way more, go to the website, look around, click through things, play with a pricing calculator, download something, than there was 3 years ago.
Yeah,
And we're
the
seeing,
consideration phase is a killer these days
Yep.
as far as effort and investment and timelines.
yeah, and so it's gotten to the point now where we even look at some of our own software tools that we use and say, like, are these still the best tools for what we need today? Do we need something that's maybe a little more, a little less direct sales focus, a little more marketing, web marketing focus, different things like that as we look at our tools. And this, it also has to do with, while I personally, I have experience with something like Salesforce, um, I'm not the person sitting in the seat doing the selling and using the tool on a day-to-day basis. And so there's been quite a bit of work within our team to kind of set, what systems are we going to use for different parts of the business process, and then kind of creating some internal policies and user manuals and things like that, so that everybody's aligned in that area. And I think that's been a big part of it, as well as having some really good planning processes where sales is on the marketing planning calls to see what's coming down the pipeline from marketing. We're in software, so product is involved in those
Yeah.
calls, because we have a representative from the product team who's previously worked in sales, works in product, and knows what the roadmap is like for the next 3-4 quarters. And so when we look at, okay, we've got a feature coming out in Q3, do we have messaging queued up around that release? And do we have content? Do we have different pieces kind of centered around that, assets being created, all sorts of things like that, to make sure that we're not just creating a software and then 6 months later starting to market it.
So you basically leveled the whole concept up from marketing to sales alignment to marketing to sales development alignment in a way where all three of those things are talking to each other.
So those are all different individuals, though, right? I mean, like the mentality, that the way they're measured in their roles, whether they want to onboard to the softwares or the tools that they have, like they're all individuals. Has the experience in implementing that within your organization been streamlined? Like was it day one that easy, or has it been a process? Like, so walk us through that. That's interesting.
Yeah, hands down, not it was not that way out of the box. I
Shocking.
think the product, getting the product and sales alignment was super important, especially early on, and even now as we look at some demand in the market for certain products, where we see that there's a need for certain things. And the more closely aligned our product and our sales team can be, the less we have salespeople selling things that aren't going to be ready in time, and also the less that we have product building things that nobody actually cares about. So I think that's where it's really, the focus has come in, and our product team, our customer support team, our sales team, it's a very tight loop. There's not really, there's very clear indications of which features are generating, which features are value add versus our revenue drivers. And even in our roadmap, that's actually, we have a prioritization matrix around what features are going to be created based on some of those types of, some of those metrics. And that then feeds into the marketing plan, because, if we have a new tool now for onboarding corporates digitally through your website, identifying who owns the company, different things like that. And we could build that whole process in-house and say, okay, this is what we actually want. But what we know with tools, especially when you're dealing with compliance where it's very complex, is making sure that the product is something that's how customers want to buy it.
Yes.
What we find with that kind of, there's certain people in the product team that it's a consultative sales game that they're really playing, like talking to the customer, interviewing what do they want. We record those sessions, because what we get beyond just I want feature A or B, we get the language of what the customer is actually calling it, right? And Jordan and I have talked about this before, where especially in the finance and compliance acronyms and lingo and buzzwords, and you can come up with all this stuff, but a client might be searching, Google search, what is this software? Or how do I set up this? How do I do this better? And so that initial customer engagement to create your product specs can also be a really good source of your keyword search terms in the future as well.
So it seems like transparency and having opportunities where different teams from either developing of the product or your sales team or your marketing team have opportunities to kind of see into each other's worlds from time to time, and it seems like you've kind of deliberately made that part of the process. One of the reasons we even went into this topic is it's, I think, something that you have books and books and books about sales and books about marketing and books even about development and building a company, but they rarely talk about those intersections. And I think that that's kind of a skill some people just develop organically over time. Like it sounds like that has been the case with you, but it's not something people talk about very frequently. And I think there is a science to it. So I'm glad we're unlocking some of those secrets for you. Do you think that that's something that other people in your circles or other business leaders that you run into also struggle with, or they've also found their own methods to that, you think, in your experience?
Well, I was talking to somebody recently about, I can't remember the name of the author, but the book Crossing the Chasm. And there's, other books like The Lean Startup and different, books like this. And we were talking about how, like, there's nothing in there that's really like, aha, groundbreaking or anything, along those lines. But that the value in the book is actually, it's reminding you that it's all comes back down to the basics, right? And that's really what, when they talk about, like, oh, you want to get to here, well, who's the first people that are going to buy it, and what are the concerns that they have? If you're launching a brand new product that nobody's ever seen before, or trying to even create a market, which is even harder, you're really starting from the square one, and you have a lot of education and convincing to do. Versus if you're going into the market with a product where you already, it's very clear how people want the business process to work. And, certain parts of compliance is actually like this, where there's a very defined workflow that people consider to be best practice. And so that user experience is very prescriptive. But what's actually happening under the hood from a data privacy and cybersecurity perspective is very different. But we still have to, we say sell how the customer wants to buy, right? And I think that's a big part of it.
If you were giving advice to somebody else that was wanting to do something similar, like start a global software as a service platform of some fashion, and they had to challenge the same challenge of building this sales team and a marketing team, what would be the number one piece of advice you'd probably suggest to them? And I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but
be honest, Matthew.
Yeah.
Only one. Yeah, I would say measure twice, cut once, maybe. And that spans along a number of areas. In our world, we chose Canada as a jurisdiction of incorporation for a number of reasons. And over time, that has proved to be a really good decision. Glad we didn't go south of the border. Glad we didn't.
No offense, USA. No.
No, but it actually comes down to the type of clients when we're taking on a client from, let's say, Europe. The fact that we have GDPR equivalency, the fact that we have all of these, these different pieces. Canada is very well respected on the international front for what we needed to do was really good. And I've seen, many of our customers who are fintechs, they're looking at, okay, well, if I'm going to start my company, I'm going to start it out of the United Kingdom. We're going to base it out of London because there's government supports and there's incubators and there's a community and there's a culture and maybe the regulatory environment is better, and so all of these different factors. And so that's there's those various business considerations. But the other thing, when I say measure twice, is like talking to customers as early on. When we started iComply, we actually didn't incorporate the company until we had somebody ready to kind of check and ready to sign a paperwork. We had the first license basically sitting there waiting for us to finish the incorporation for. And we did that because we wanted to know that there was, before we spent all this time and money building a business, we wanted to know that people would actually pay what we thought we could make a business selling it for. And so that was something that I'm glad we did it that way, because you just don't know when you're, especially with the software world, when you're doing a startup, things can go so many different ways. And one of the tools we use in house is Slack, and great for internal communication and stuff like this. But when hear the origin story of Slack, I think they were building a video game at first, and like, what developer hasn't built a chat app in their history? And how do you get to like a multi-billion-dollar chat app company, right? And they pulled it off. But I think that came from from testing, and they weren't getting traction in one area, the original product they were building, at least not the traction they wanted. And then all of a sudden they start showing people this little chat app that they've built, and next thing you know, they've got a real business being scaled off of that. And the more you can do that before you have to take on venture capital and meet all the obligations and turn around, get revenue on the books as quickly as possible. It's kind of like you're kind of like seeding the pond a little bit ahead of time if you can get a lot of that legwork, and before you launch the product, be able to know that, hey, these are some customers that already really like what we're talking about, and maybe we can even get a customer to start paying for some of the build. And in software, that's definitely something that you can do sometimes.
I think the thing that I've really taken out of this specific, interview, if that's what we want to call it, is, Matthew, you're extremely methodical. Every single thing you've done to implement marketing sales alignment, through to how you go about your sales process, to how you started the organization, was a measure twice, cut once type approach. And I know, as an entrepreneur, we're not all perfect. We all make a lot of mistakes, and the school hard knocks is probably the most important, most expensive school. But I think at the end of the day, I have to say I really appreciate your approach, because a lot of, whether you be a salesperson, a manager, a VP of whatever, or a marketer, a CEO, and you're implementing these things, I would say in my experience, probably 80% of the time, it isn't measure twice, cut once. It's usually run in, your hair ablaze, there's a fire you're putting out, we need measurement immediately, we're losing revenue, we just lost a huge deal, we this and that. So I just have to say, round of applause for you, because a lot of organizations, in my experience, don't operate that way.
The best laid plans, though, right?
Well, I appreciate that. I think that's maybe that comes from some of the school of hard knocks, like running.
Sure.
Even, there's been times where I've come in with the greatest ideas in sliced bread, and this is how we're going to do all of this. And you go and, talk to the team, and then all of a sudden somebody's like, well, what about this? And what about that? And next thing you realize, like, oh, actually this idea wasn't so great. But, having that internal, that internal feedback, and, having the ability to have people who, ideally you're hiring people who are better at what they're doing. Like, I'm not the marketer in our company. I'm not in charge of sales. There's people that are more experienced selling this specific type of product to these specific types of customers. People with, really great experience in marketing and advertising to these types of customers with these types of products. That the whole reason why I, as a CEO, hire these people is so that you can, put that, hand that off to them, so that I don't have to do it all, right? And I think that's really hard, especially at the beginning, where you're like holding this baby really tight, and you've got 5 people on your team. But as you grow and you're 20, 30, 40 people, the more the more redundant I can make myself, the better off it is. So I find myself a lot more times like presenting a concept or an idea to the team, and it may or may not actually make it through their process of deciding this is actually something they want to do. And at the end of the day, they're in charge of making sure that the metrics and the goals that they set, they're actually hitting them. So they're gonna, use their experience and their knowledge to get there.
It's fascinating because a lot of the time people view marketing and sales alignment as something that's scary. I'm a
Mm.
salesperson and they're micromanaging me now, and I have to have transparency and this and that. And as a marketer, you're going, ooh, I don't want to hear that the leads aren't necessarily what they need because I don't know how to tweak it
Mhm.
100% because I don't have the transparency. When really, I think marketing and sales alignment is all about empowering people, and providing
Absolutely.
transparency is what's going to actually bring corporate success. And a lot of the time, that's why it's from the top down. It's not middle management or the bottom up trying to provide that. It's the top going, look, we need X to occur: revenue targets, geographical growth targets, attrition rate, retention rate targets, whatever it is. And they're forcing it down. And I think the empowerment is, I think, the thing that probably, when I'm hearing you talk, it sounds like you guys have done quite well at iComply, if I'm to be that bold.
Yeah, it's definitely, thank you. It's I think it's been a very like, it's obviously it's a learning curve. But
Yeah.
I empowering the team is definitely I think a core part of our management approach is,
Mm,
you have two options. You can take everything on and do it all yourself, and you can kind of invent a 24/7 job, or you can build a business around it and employ other people to run with it, and then you have to trust them to do that.
yeah.
And so, I think one of the things that's been really good on our side, you're talking about on the alignment front, is a little bit of that. Sometimes people don't, you can be afraid of what they don't know, and they have, some fears or ideas of what some term means. Oh, marketing sales alignment. Oh, now they're going to tell me what to do. Or, the marketing team, like, oh, it turns out that, just because somebody fills out this form doesn't mean that, we're going to sell anything.
Hmm.
And, so it's been a bit of a shift in metrics. Like one of the core things we look at marketing is, yes, leads coming in off the website is great, but do they make it through the sales qualification process, right? Did they actually were they actually a valid
Yeah.
opportunity? Whether we win or lose, that's not really on the marketing team, but not, whether it's, spam coming in off the website, that is something that we kind of have to filter out around. Again, the goal here is drive revenue, and then on the sales team, it's quite similar where, you've got some things coming into the funnel. You don't want to be, every you can. I get emails from these companies that are like, would you like to buy the leads from like these 20 competitors, and you can buy their contact? And I'm like, well, like,
Yeah.
one, like, this is like, sure, I've got, look at this, guys, I just bought 4,000 leads, here you go,
Yeah.
sales team. Oh, how come you didn't get any customers out of it? Well, maybe it was the quality of the lead to start. So, that's been a big part of it, but also helping the team to, by getting more alignment between the team, we've seen more focus on strategy,
Mm,
and looking around, as an example within our own team. One of the things we identified was there's a whole new segment of the market that has to use our software, and new industries that didn't fall into this regulatory environment before, and now they do, and
interesting.
now they have to find something. And traditionally KYC, AML, like data privacy protection, all this stuff is something that traditionally the banks had to do, and now every accounting firm, every law firm, every car dealership all has to do this in most countries around the world. And so there's all these new industries, and one of the things that we've seen is that change, just in the people coming to our website, and they're the customer persona is very different. Somebody who's a chief compliance officer of a multi-billion-dollar bank versus somebody who's a general manager of a car dealership. It's like, I heard we have to do this KYC thing, right?
Mm,
Just a very different type of customer. And it's a very different sales process. And what we didn't want is to have our enterprise, software sales team being bogged down with people that just came in with a specific need. Hey, I just need this thing in order to get my car dealership, back to selling cars. I just need this one thing. How do we make that easy? And that's kind of created a whole roadmap for our product team to say, here's specific industries that we want to be able to self-serve right into this. And the sales team can be a post-sales support rather than, coming in for very small deals compared to, some of our accounts where, you might have 1 million customers who are using the portals or using the dashboards on a regular basis. Some of these, a real estate lawyer might do 8 to 10 customers a month, and that might be a high volume real estate lawyer.
Yeah.
So that's been part of that is, by not just focusing on just the metrics, but looking at the overall goals and letting the team have ownership in the strategy. They can start, looking at the strategy and being like, well, I'm not going to hit the goal that I want, or maybe it's actually too much effort to hit the goal that I want. How can I do this easier? And, if they can get the same result with half the effort, I'm all for it. So, yeah.
That's what it's all about.
That's like almost a perfect example of all the things we were talking about through this episode and through this interview, like perfect case study right there. So maybe on that note, I do want to thank you for joining us on the Challenge-tunity podcast and, giving us a little bit of insight from both a business leader and also in a really interesting industry.
Cheers, Matthew.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Have a great day. Cheers.
Cheers.